Well, I want to thank my friends that I actually haven't seen physically in almost 4 years. The last game at the Lake Elsinore Storm, but they graciously agreed to come on to my episode 2 of Karl's Corner. I want to introduce my special guests, Michael and Suzanne Lopez, who are here in California. Where exactly are you guys? You're down in Marietta?
Menifee.
Menifee. So yeah, you're not
just a little north of Marietta.
Yeah, okay. And when I decided to do my Karl's Corner and I looked at the list of friends that I have and all their unique backgrounds of what they do in their life and their careers, and I have like 15, 20 people, and obviously you and Michael with your career and Suzanne, and I figured, hey, you'd be perfect on there, especially the play of the world and everything, but your background in law enforcement. And I just want to, again, thank you for being on here. And first of all, I guess introduce both of you, where you grew up, how you got into law enforcement, and then how you met, and we'll go from there. Start with you, Michael.
Okay, Karl, thank you for having us on here. It's I've been looking forward to this. I was born in Los Angeles many years ago, and when I was growing up, I wanted to go into the educational field. I wanted to teach. My dad was a LA sheriff's deputy, and so that kind of influenced my decision to go into law enforcement. I worked various jobs. I worked at the newspaper office. I was a shoe salesman, and then when I was in my 20s, I said, no, I want to do something else. So I applied for the Riverside Sheriff's Department back in 1981 and was accepted. Went through their 4-month academy, which is now 6 months. And the 4 months of academy training was 4 months that I'll never forget. I mean, just to go through the academy was something really special to me because I wanted to go in law enforcement really, really bad.
Was this you, Michael?
That is me, and that's Sheriff Ben Clark, one of the best sheriffs that I've ever worked for. I've had a lot of good sheriffs, but he was my first sheriff that I worked for, Sheriff Ben Clark. And they named the training center after him, Ben Clark Training Center, which was a great honor in his name.
Where was the training center? Where was the training center?
Over at Riverside County. It's off of Van Buren there. And I'll never forget that day there, Karl, because my parents were there, my family, and it was really something to have the badge pinned on me that day, because 4 months of my life were dedicated to the Riverside Sheriff's Department to become a law enforcement deputy. And that picture brings back some memories and some tears from inside me there. It's really
how long
something.
Ago was that?
That was
how
back in that was in 1981.
Beautiful.
Once I graduated from the academy, I was sent to Riverside County Jail, which is now Robert Presley Detention Center. We called it Riverside County Jail, and that's me inside of a house. It's really something. Looking back at these pictures there, and I spent 27 months at the Riverside County Jail. We housed inmates, obviously. We fed them, and I worked the night shift there. And after I worked at the jail, I was sent out to patrol, which was my dream, to work the streets and drive patrol cars. Like I said, Karl, and that's me in the back row, third from the left there, with the glasses on. I was also a school resource officer at a high school, and that's all the school resource officers there. I was a school resource officer for 4 years in Moreno Valley, where I did most of my patrol time. I did patrol. I was a field training officer. I love training brand new deputies. I had a lot of fun training, and that's me giving a tour of some little kids, obviously out of school. That's another thing I used to enjoy. Just going out there, Karl, with the people, with the community, and just I really enjoyed it. And I was like I said, I was a training officer for deputies. I did tours. Uh, I was a corporal. I retired as a corporal in 2016. So I did 35 years with the Riverside Sheriff's Department. I also did family. I did court services the last couple of years of my career. But I mean, Carl, I've been retired for about 7 years now. I retired in 2016, like I said. And that's me over at Moreno Valley City Hall. I received the Officer of the Quarter. The Moreno Valley used to give out Officer of the Quarter to deputies that exemplified and really showed other officers, the department, of what kind of person you were. And I was a corporal there, as you can see the 2 stripes on my arms there. And
Right.
Law enforcement has changed, Carl. As I look back, I see on social media all these officers that are getting pretty much assassinated. And I'm sure there were officers back then when I was working in the early 80s that were getting hurt or killed. But nowadays, my heart breaks for these officers that are being shot like every other day. I read about these officers walking up to a house, domestic violence, and the husband comes out and just starts shooting. I could be wrong, but 35 years. I'm basing my 35-year career on what I did back then and today. I would get a call of a domestic violence, and I don't remember the husband coming out and wanting to kill the police officers. Now you hear about that every day, and my heart breaks for these young police officers.
Michael, I have to say that it's a term that we use for our military. Thanks for
Yes.
your service, but
Thank
it should
you.
also be for law enforcement, because people have no clue. They're always trying to say, I hate to use these cliches, what's coming up, toxic masculinity and all this other stuff that's going on in the world. But when they're in trouble, what do they want? They want that male or female there as authority to help them. But where
Yes.
our society is going is a whole nother thing. And I have a friend who's and actually a cousin whose husband was in law enforcement back east. And before I moved out here 5 years ago, he only had like another 2. And he says, my last 2 years can't come soon enough, because he was able to retire within 20 years. And he couldn't wait to get out, because even little suburban New Jersey was getting insane. So, yes, I sympathize.
And I know you have ties to Philadelphia, Carl. And I just read 3 or 4 days ago, 3 officers were shot back there. 3. And
It's a war, Michael. It's a war zone, and I hate to say it, I have a sister that still lives there in the Italian neighborhood that used to be really a wonderful neighborhoods back then. That you see them, from the early when my grandparents grew up and my parents grew up, they were pretty much safe. You go to the market, whatever, because I hate to say, look, I'm an Italian descent, and they say certain things about certain groups of who we associated with. But there was not that kind of crime. We took care of ourselves, and something that needed the police, okay, they came later. But nowadays, that level is no longer existent. And it's like they call it the Wild Wild West, but it's now the Wild Wild Country.
No, I totally agree with you, Carl. And I look back at some of the laws that I was enforcing compared to today, domestic violence. Back then, and I hate to use this comparison because, obviously none of us condone domestic violence and husband beating up the wife. But back then, if we got a call of a domestic violence, we went to the house, we told the husband or the boyfriend, don't do it again, and we left. Nowadays, it's mandated that, when I was working, it's mandated that the husband be arrested. So, the laws have changed. Good and bad, Carl. Drugs. If you're in possession.
I was just going to bring that up. It was not only the alcohol, but it's the drug, but the proliferation. I grew up. We're all right, Michael. We're a little bit about the same age. Remember the war on drugs? How's that
Yes.
turned out? How's that
Yes.
turned out?
Yeah. Yeah. I I look back every day, Carl. I mean, it's something that, to the day that I leave this world, it's something that I'll always remember, what we did back in when I was started and nowadays. And I hate to sound redundant, but I feel so sorry for these officers that are working today because their hands are tied. The prisons, low felons are low priority felons are getting released. So, Carl, I mean, I have, I look back to be redundant, and it's changed so much.
Yeah, and it's a shame it's not for the better. On a
Right.
lighter note, Michael, personally, you have on your Facebook page, which you had the picture of Jimmy Page. You're a big Zeppelin fan?
I love Led Zeppelin, Carl. I've seen them many times. I do have a I don't want people to think, oh, he's all law enforcement. Well, I am, but then I also have a weaker side to me. I love Led Zeppelin. I love Jimmy Page. He's my idol. I have tattoos of Led Zeppelin on my arms. I first saw Led Zeppelin back in 1969 at the old Swing Auditorium in San Bernardino at front row center seats. And that's probably why I love Led Zeppelin. I used to use the word love with the group, but I do have a soft side.
Well,
Susie and
I think that's the other thing that we both grew up in. Even though the world was insane out of its mind with assassinations, but the 60s and 70s still had some of the greatest music out there.
Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, and they just don't have groups like that today, do they? I mean,
No.
these 13 and 14-year-old teenagers, you know who they listen to? The Beatles, Led Zeppelin.
Well, Beatles are still my number one. There's not much I don't know. I grew up with them, and I have cousins who saw them when they came into Philadelphia, but I was only able to see 3 out of 4. But we could continue this a little bit, but then Suzanne's waiting there very patiently, and we haven't talked to you yet. We're in like 13 minutes. So Suzanne, I want to bring you back in and say thanks for being here and your background. But then how did you guys meet?
We actually met online.
on the computer.
Yeah, on the computer, not knowing that he was in the department at the time. And then once we actually met each other, then we discovered that we both worked for the same agency. He in Moreno Valley and I was in Riverside.
Interesting.
So it was just kind of a funny thing. And we've been married for 23 years.
God bless. That's great. So how did you get into law enforcement? What's your background?
My mother and my sister both worked administratively for San Bernardino Police Department. And in all honesty, I wasn't looking to get into law enforcement. It just happened to be. And at the time that I was applying for a position, it was an office assistant position. And Riverside sheriffs were the first agency to pick me up as a clerical office assistant. And then honestly, I wanted more money down the road, and I applied for a community service officer position, and that is what I got promoted to in 2000. I started in 92, worked clerical till 2000 in sheriff's personnel. And then in 2000, I was promoted to a community service officer, and I was reassigned out to the Temecula Southwest area. And I've been there since I retired September 1st of this year, a month ago.
Yeah, I'm just saying, when I saw this picture, I said, nobody wants to blank with you with that.
No.
That arsenal.
The great thing is, since coming out to Temecula in 2000, I have pretty much spent the last 17 years on specialized teams. So being our special enforcement team, our problem-oriented policing team, and then community services. And so that picture that you saw me carrying that firearm, that was from a search warrant. And I've done hundreds of search warrants and specialized operations.
That was found in Temecula?
That was found in Temecula.
Wow. You know, it's interesting that I have a little part-time job and security. It's Securitas, but it's basically you're there to just to observe and report. And on Thursdays, there's a Reliance Church. I'm sure if you've been through Temecula, that is there. So I do there on their Thursday nights. They have their women's Bible studies. And it's only for an hour and a half, but you have to be there 4 hours. And I'm like, why would you need a guard at a church? But then we realize what goes on in some of the churches. And speaking some of the people, and now on their today's Sunday, on their Sunday services, they have plain clothes that are actually parishioners, but they're just like you, Michael. They're retired law enforcement packed with guns just in case. And I'm just surprised, like, oh my God, like, yeah. And they say you wouldn't believe, at every service there's at least a minimum of 3 because they get anywhere from 200 to 500 people for a Sunday service. So I'm just thinking it's just like, wow, even in, quote, Temecula, that, but at least they're ahead of the game. And just, and God forbid something would happen, they would have enough good guys for the bad guys. Yeah. So continue.
The picture of me on the news, actually the picture of me on the news, there was a mosque that wanted to come into Temecula, and those were public hearings with the city that lasted till about 3 o'clock in the morning, but we had plainclothes officers mixed into the crowd of people that was there. I was just standing.
Wow.
So things happen.
How about this lighter side here?
Oh, that was a search warrant, and that battling ram that I'm holding is, I don't know, how much do they weigh?
About over 100 pounds.
They weigh about 100 pounds, and I was just trying to lift it, which that was about as far as I could get. So we were up in the Lake Hemet area, up in the hills, and that's on the roadway on Rancho, California.
Rancho, California. I kind of thought it looked familiar.
Yeah, there was a traffic collision.
Yeah, that's the one thing I noticed here in California, that when I had a friend come out a couple of years ago, she spent like 3-4 days, and we gave her the whole tour between LA and the beaches and whatever. And I dropped her off at LAX. I said, "What's the one thing you didn't hear?" There's a car horn. Now you guys drive like kamikaze pilots on, the interstates, like doing 90, but they're so polite at a 4-way stop sign, so it's different. We're back east. If there's a microsecond that goes by at a, stoplight and turns red, they're blowing the horn on you. So there's that difference. Now, did you do traffic, patrols that way? Because I know people, the way they drive on 15 and the interstates are just insane. You could be doing 75, 80, and they whiz right by it.
Yeah.
So I did traffic as working on a team. When my team was a little busy, I would occupy my time. And if there was a traffic collision that I could assist on, I would go out there and help. And basically on the roadways within the city. The highway is CHP, but we assisted CHP if they needed help with anything, road closure or even freeway closures because of a large collision on the freeway. They didn't need any more traffic coming onto the freeway, so we would assist in any way. And I'm Mikey in Moreno Valley every day.
Yeah,
I worked traffic for about a year in Moreno Valley, but yeah, nowadays they have specialized teams. They have the reconstruction team that goes out and handle fatal accidents. Traffic is a special breed of deputies. You have to really be in the traffic. I was mostly into the patrol, Carl. So, but I did do some traffic out in Moreno Valley, where I spent most of my career.
Well, I just want to bring up a little detective. Evidently, your video feed is jumping a little bit, but your audio is fine. So I'm just going to keep it good. It's just the way this technology works or doesn't work sometime, but you're still there as a screen. So,
Okay.
we could continue. But Mike, and both of you, where do you see the way the current state of the country, the world, and when defund the police came out, and then now with a senator in Washington D.C. was carjacked, and you think it's going to get back to, because when I grew up, my father said you never talk back to a police officer. When they stop you, you say yes sir, put your hands on there and do what they say. Now, as you say, Mike, they want to be confrontational, that you're stopping them because of some kind of injustice that you feel you want to put on that person. Where do you think this is going to lead?
Karl, again, as I look back and I see social media if I made a traffic stop, which in Mortar Valley, there's a lot of activity. Crime's everywhere. People will say, well, there's a lot of crime here, but not over there. But crime's everywhere. If I made a traffic stop, people were respectful to me. And, I'm on the premise that you treat someone the way you want to be treated. I've been cussed at, spit at, but yet I treated them with the utmost respect. I went up to a driver. How you doing? My name is Corporal Lopez. I stopped you for this, this, and this. And most of the time they were polite. Nowadays, if an officer makes a stop, and I'm not saying on every stop, there's good and bad people, just like there's good officers, bad officers, there's good doctors, bad doctors, and I can go on and on. But nowadays, if an officer stops someone, I stopped you for this. Can I see your license? These drivers are now saying, no, I'm not going to give you my license. And it wasn't like that. But go ahead, Karl.
No, it's funny. Like they're going to say no. That's the first thing, in all movies. It's the drivers and registration and insurance. It's like, no, you're not going to give it to them.
Yeah, and I'm sure there was refusals back when I was working, but the people that I stopped were very, very cooperative with me. Nowadays, and that's why I feel so bad for these officers. And I hate to keep sounding redundant about that, but an officer makes a stop on someone. I'm not giving you my license, officer. Well, I stopped you for this, or this, or whatever the reason was. I asked Karl, where are we headed to in this world of law enforcement? And right now, the pendulum is off to the left, in my opinion. And I'm not sure if we're going to go back to the right side of the pendulum. And it just sounds so cliche, because I think we're still on the left side of law enforcement. It's not good. I support law enforcement 100%, obviously, but I don't think we're headed back to the right side right now. Anyway, I'm hoping we will. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think 2 Saturdays ago, when I was coming back from a different location, and it was like right around 10 o'clock, and I think they did one of these checkpoints for DUIs.
Yeah.
And I think I was in I don't know, I forget where I was. Yeah. But okay. And then you gotta go in one lane and whatever. And so what I already did, because I still have a New Jersey license, because it was still cheaper to go get a California license to renew my Jersey license, because it was only $25. So when he asked for my license, I said, officer, I still have I prefaced them. I still have a New Jersey license. He kind of looked at me and go, really? Okay. He looked at it. He said, okay, enjoy your day. So, but I gave that to him ahead of time, rather than him to look at it and say, well, this is New Jersey. I let him know.
Yeah.
Who's your buddy there?
Simba.
Right.
So yeah, Michael, I think having you guys on and having the years that you have
Simba.
down the road, if you have people that you talk to, this would be a good venue to continue. This is not like a one and done that we're going to be talking today. That I think with you having your experience in there, and I'm sure you still talk to people in the industry that maybe have something to say or a voice out there, bring them on. We could come back on again and have another guest and have a round table. So yeah, this is not a one and done. Then
Okay.
anything that down the road that you say, hey, Carl, I like to speak about this.
All
Suzanne,
right.
you want to speak about that? Please let me know. We'll set this
All
up.
right.
You see how easy this is, and put this on the Facebook page and a YouTube page that
All
people
right.
could be out there and be advocates for not the good old days, but just some like normal, like they say, common sense is not common anymore. Just to bring a little bit of common sense back to our world. So continue. I just did
All
my
right.
little rant, but where would you like to continue with a little bit between both of you?
Well, one thing I like to say, Carl, people always ask me, do you miss the job? And I say, the thing I do miss about being in law enforcement, and I did it for 35 years, I miss the camaraderie of working with other officers. I really miss that. I love the job. I work for 5 sheriffs, and I, I I miss working with the guys and the women. I had a real good time with them, and I don't want to say that I don't miss the job because I really enjoy doing it, but I probably miss the camaraderie of working with other officers. So, and I'm
Well,
sure.
yeah, that's with anybody who, because I know my dad worked construction, concrete work, and it's very, very demanding. It's very physical. But when you love what you do, the camaraderie with the other guys is because when he used to come home from work, that's all he talked about having, talking with this guy. We had this fun, whatever. I said, didn't you work? Yeah, of course
Yeah,
you did. So I guess with you love getting up in the morning doing what you did. And so your fellow officers, your fellow people, it was a people environment rather than someone just working in an office, the same mundane thing, 9 to 5, and you really don't have any contact. You had contact with all the good and
yeah,
all the bad, but you still
yeah,
went home and still enjoyed it.
exactly. And then one other thing, I don't want all your fans out there to say, "Oh, Corporal Lopez, he's a grumpy old law enforcement officer." No, there's. I still believe that the majority of people are good people out there, Carl. There's
Of
just
course.
probably that small percentage that that has some issues with law enforcement, and you know, I still believe that again, the majority of us people are still great people. And that's another thing. When I used to put the uniform on, drive the patrol car, I enjoyed talking to all these great people out here because they supported us. And you know what, Carl? And even some of the so-called criminals, I used to enjoy talking to them. I mean, they, you know, there are some, there are some people out there that don't support law enforcement, but will give us the respect. And again, there's that small percentage that don't. So, the majority of people are still good out there. So,
Well, they still want that force there just in case of
right,
some,
right.
they need that no matter where you feel. But yeah, we come from a different background, great parents, great
Yes,
upbringing, respect your elders, respect law enforcement, even though you
right.
disagree with them, don't give them a reason to arrest you or whatever. It's like, they're saying being arrested is very hard to do, right, Michael?
Yes,
To be really arrested, you really have to be a real, blankety blank to get arrested. Am I correct?
no,
Yeah.
you're absolutely correct, Carl. I mean, no, that's a good point. Officers, you know, again, I believe most of the officers are good out there. Um, I don't want to go into personalities. We all have different personalities in every field: doctors, judges, lawyers. But in my opinion, the majority of officers are good. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would disagree with me, and that's right, and that's fine. But when I was working, the majority of the officers I worked with were good, solid officers. And I'm not just talking about the Riverside Sheriff's Department. I work with other officers too, and they were all professional. And again, there's good officers, bad officers, good judges, bad judges, and I can go on and on. But the majority of officers are good, Carl. So, and
And thank God,
I'll
and thank God for that, because And I think me as a regular person, every once in a while, that people who are in the trenches every day, I think it must have been a couple of months ago, and in passing, I think I was going to a Jersey Mike's and they were coming in for lunch too. And I just gave them a heads up and, thank you for your service too. And just to give them a little thank you, you see a smile on their face and realize they go through anguish all day, but just someone just appreciating what they do, not to be offended by their presence. Because, you hear some places, they go into a Starbucks or whatever, or they will refuse their service to give to the police officers or whatever. Are you kidding me? The one thing I know, I have to give a little short story that in Philly, I grew up one block from the original Philly cheesesteak Pats. And it's a, kind of gritty neighborhood and whatever. And, they have like the steak Nazi if you don't know how to order the steak correctly. But then, there's a line and then there's one or two officers and you could tell there was something going on in the city that night. They just came for a break. And the guy at the line said, "I'd stop everything." He said, "Well, officer, what do you want?" He gave him their steak, no charge, whatever. So it's not all bad. It's still good, but I think the bad is getting more publicity than it should.
Right. I agree with that. If I went into a restaurant when I first started working or a convenience store, they welcomed us. And like you said, nowadays you hear, "No, we aren't going to serve you because you're wearing a uniform or you have the gun on." It didn't happen back then. So,
but then if something happened to their store, who first of all would they call it? It's like ridiculous.
Law enforcement,
of course.
And you know what, Carl? And these services that are refusing officers will be doing their job, and they will get there to help these people, even though they've been refused service. I mean, and that's what bothers me. We will still be there no matter what. Cuss us out, refuse service, spit on us, but who's going to be there? The law enforcement officer will always be there.
Yeah, Suzanne, you're talking too much.
Sorry. Just my 2 cents about the whole thing. There's good and bad in every profession, and like Mike said, how he respected everybody. I actually had guys thanking me when I'm taking them to jail because I would give them the respect. The second they disrespected me, then it was over. And then I would just shut down verbally and not say anything to them and keep it all strictly business. But they want to chat in the back of the unit on the way to the jail. And again, the minute they disrespected me, I was finished. But a lot of them would say, "Hey, I appreciate you being so nice," and I'm thinking, "Dude, I'm taking you to jail." Okay, But and I don't know if I made this clear real quick. Mike was a sworn officer, an armed officer. As a community service officer, I am not armed. I do not have a firearm. And
she was not sworn.
I was non-sworn. So
okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know that distinction.
Yeah. I didn't carry a gun. I wore the same uniform and I drove the same car, but I was not an armed officer. So
I didn't know that existed.
That does exist.
Is that unique just for California? Is that all all over the country?
Yeah, it's pretty much all over the country, and you get your community service officers, and they're the ones that handle all the nitty gritty stuff, all the non-emergency calls that happen, the past calls. For instance, somebody broke into my house 5 hours ago. Can you come out and take a report? Yeah, okay, then that's what we do, and assist with traffic control. And then again, fortunate enough to get on a specialized team. And you book evidence and you process a crime scene and you photograph. And that's what I was doing over the last 17 years.
A community service officer, Carl, like Susie, very, very valuable because they would handle low priority reports, transport, which would relieve the sworn officer like us, like me and other officers to handle higher priority calls. Correct? I mean,
correct.
Yeah. So, they would handle traffic. They would block streets, which would allow the officer.
Scene control.
Right. So,
as they say, you learn something new every day. I didn't know there was that much. There was that distinction between. I thought you all were the same,
Oh,
and
no.
you had, were armed and whatever.
No.
No.
But that's something to understand. So, but I think we just scratched the surface today. There's
Okay.
much more in depth in certain other realms about this that, like I mentioned, if you have anybody on here, and this will be, recording this now on Sunday morning, and I'll probably look at this and edit it and maybe broadcast it maybe beginning of the week on the Facebook and my YouTube page. But then you can spread the word, and then anybody else who would like to come along on here and down the road and speak of a certain incident or something.
Okay.
Here's your forum, guys. It's wide open for you. But anything, and we're 36 minutes, and maybe in closing for the next 4. What do you think? Maybe we could do. We could, end this with some kind of positive note.
I just, like I said, I don't want people to think, it's changed that much. I support law enforcement. There's good people. The majority of people out there are good, very respectful to law enforcement. I believe people support law enforcement, very, very cooperative. There's just that small percentage. And I'm hoping law enforcement goes positive. We're a little bit maybe on the negative side right now as far as
Mike, do you think it's the media that's really made it seem worse than it is, or is it really that bad?
No, I think it's a little of both. Media hasn't helped. There's good people out there. There's good law enforcement and bad law enforcement, but the majority of officers are good. Like I've been saying, I support law enforcement. I know Susie does too, and I'm hoping we go more positive in the near future, and officers don't get hurt like they are now. So
yeah,
I think the media has definitely tainted law enforcement. I mean, the media will only show maybe one officer involved shooting, and now everybody thinks that all officers are out to kill you from the get-go. And that's officer, you just want to go home at the end of the night to your family. That's the goal. And and Mikey, being a sworn officer, every night when he went out to work, and he worked the nights, which in my opinion was the most volatile. I'd give him a kiss goodbye. I tell him I love him and hope that he came home that next morning, because you just don't know. His goal was not to go out and kill somebody.
No.
His goal is to come home at the end of the night.
Yeah, but what other endeavor and occupation could you have that? True, anything can happen with anybody because of an accident or whatever. But as a police officer, there's always that remote possibility that could happen. It's again, thanks for your service, because obviously you need it out there. So, in closing, guys, anything else before we close this? Memorable. I think very positive. Second edition of KARLS Corner with my special guest with you guys.
No, I really appreciate this, Carl. It gives Susie and me a forum here to voice our opinions based on our experience. And I think that'd be great to have. I know a lot of retired police officers that would love to come on your forum here and voice their opinion too. I mean,
and not just, retired. How about some current ones that are going through it on a daily basis, and they can see,
sure.
that are in the trenches. That would be interesting too.
Sure. No, that'd be great. We can set that up. That's fantastic. So, all right.
Anytime you will be producers on this end of it, because you guys will be my law enforcement, producers, and then I have other people in entertainment who are radio DJs and some entertainers for food, for other things. But I'm going to have on KARLS Corner here like a dichotomy of all different interests and businesses. But I think it's going to be, in that regard, so really good. So,
okay,
guys, anything final thoughts before we wrap this up until the next time? Susie, you could start.
I appreciate the opportunity to do this. It's been a first for me, so I thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree with Susie, Carl, because there's not too many podcasts like you that support law enforcement, that gives the law enforcement a chance to voice their opinion. It seems like it's always negative, but I think this was positive for us.
Well, I think maybe my background, my age, we, grew up respecting authority, elders. So maybe we could bring this out there to the masses out there. So,
Sure.
yeah. So in closing, I want to thank you guys again for coming
Thank
on
you.
here. It was really informative. And I know we have still a lot more to talk about, not just
Yes.
today. And thank you for being on actually episode 2 of Karl's Corner. I appreciate it. And then, like I say, and anybody who's watching, you can see down the little scroll down below, like, subscribe, and comment, even though we are taped. But you could still put a comment down later on as we broadcast, probably maybe beginning on Monday or Tuesday of this week. And we'll go from there. And guys, like I said, once this is over, just hang on there. Don't leave the studio and we could go from there. So till next time, guys, thank you for being here. Michael and Susie Lopez, law enforcement here in Southern California. Till next time, talk to you later.